what the ultimate goal of this meeting should be or could be is the following: that we reject the old ECIPs, trying to first propose Aslan, then proposing a fixed hard fork, then proposing a fixed for testnet. And if we decide to go with a clean hard fork of Phoenix in whatever way it would be, and if we decide to revert the testnets to the Agata chain, then this would be the way going forward to reject ECIP 1061, which is the Agata specification. It would be 78 Phoenix fixed specification, and 1086, which is the testnet specification, proposing explicitly validating. And if we do so, then we would have paved the path for accepting clean. Does anyone have questions about this, rejecting the old ECIPs in favor of accepting a new one?
I don't have a question, just wanted to, for the transcript, I think you said, after I think you may have said Agartha when you actually meant Aslan. With regard to ECIP 1061.
Yes, sorry, I'm talking about Aslan. So I would, if this is clear what we are trying to do now, and if there are no objections, I would ask if anyone opposes rejecting Aslan Phoenix fixed test as before.
Bob here. Rather than rejecting, I'll just say I am in agreement with rejection.
Cool. So we don't have to do any conclusions yet. I would just take this as general sentiment of general opinion call. We don't have to decide this right now. We will make decisions towards the end of the call when everything is more clear, because we cannot reject Aslan without having a new path going forward. I mean, we could, but it's much easier to make a decision in the bundle. So the next step would be discussing the alternatives going forward. I published 2 ECIPs. They are not merged yet, so they are not considered as draft yet, but I hope they will be approved soon, so we can be certain about what we talk about. It's ECIP 1088, which proposes a clean new Phoenix hard fork. I called it vanilla option because it basically contains the ECIPs of the Ethereum Foundation Istanbul hard fork, including EIP 1884. That's a vanilla option, which is, let's say, it's a compromise in security and safety, because we know that on the Ethereum Foundation testnet it's already live and working and it's well tested. And as alternative, I propose ECIP 1089, which is basically the same, bringing Istanbul to Ethereum Classic, but as what I call the classic option, which does not contain EIP 1884, but ECIP 1080 with this self-balance opcode instead, and it does not contain EIP 2000, but 1706 with 1283 instead. That's a lot of numbers, and I hope you have these ECIPs open, just so you be sure to follow what's going on. I have heard in the recent days different opinions. Some say let's just do the vanilla option to have certainty that this will go through sufficiently and secure and safe. I'm sorry. And I also heard voices saying we should move on with the classic version because it was it's closer to what's initially agreed upon Aslan. And any comments on that?
Hey, Bob here. So, I mean, my observation in terms of that classic option 1089 is, you know, it's similar in scope to what we're doing already. The tricky piece seems to be all around the gas metering change, you know, where firstly, going right back to the very start, back to the initial sort of Azatlan 1061 or 1072 change, was that the assumption that we had in the meeting at the time was that the scope of that Azatlan Yingchun variant was essentially Istanbul, but without the repricings. But then it turned out that 1884 contained a mixture of pieces. Then we thought we'd got that captured with the respecking of the Phoenix overlay, but then, you know, the combination of those didn't work either. The current 1089, to my mind, is maybe, I don't know that it's any different really, apart from that we're doing the 1283 activation rather than the 2200. So I mean, what I'd propose as a classic option is 1089 as exists, but without the 1283 gas metering change. You know, I think 1089 as it stands is still in that sort of scary middle ground. And my fear would be if we tried that scope, then we come to the implementation, and in a few days' time we find, oh, that doesn't work either. You know, that's still problematic in some way. That really all of these changes around gas metering are likely all tied together. So I think we either do everything, or we'd have to do a more conservative 1089, which would exclude 1283.
Yeah, my opinion is that we should probably just do the wholesale changes. There doesn't, from like looking at the call from the last time, there was no knowledge or awareness of any contracts that would be broken by the changes. So it seems like the safest and most like sort of engineering like knowledge of what will transpire on our chain is already bundled in 1088. And so I don't really see any reason that we would leave out the opcode other than like being attached to the idea that we want to do something different, but without like just engineering cause for it, I think.
I'm sorry, I missed that. My internet cut out. Could somebody summarize, maybe using which opcode you're talking about leaving out and why?
I was saying not to. So I was saying that I'm more in favor of just vanilla ESIP 1088 versus so wholesale taking in the gas metering changes that we left out.
Yes. Okay. And was that in response to leaving out? Somebody wanted to leave out a certain opcode?
Just stating that, like, I'm pro ESIP 1088. I think maybe Bob was just laying out the options between 1089. Yeah.
Okay.
So Isaac, that was it's not actually related to any given opcode. If we were implementing the standalone self balance, we would be the same on opcodes anyway. I guess the topic really is not related to opcodes per se. It's to the gas repricings of whether we do or do not bring in the whole bundle of stuff that was in 1884 plus either 220 or 183 via 1706. Like I think that the viable options that we have are everything or a classic option, which is not quite what 1089 is currently proposing, because 189 as written right now does have the 1283 activation as well. So the comment I was making really is 189 as planned still to me seems like a halfway house that could fail in exactly the same way as we've already repeatedly failed, in trying to thread the middle ground. Like I think the safe options are either everything or none of the gas metering stuff, which would mean a 189 but as written, but without 1283 as well.
Got it. Thanks for that. Sorry, I couldn't hear you because of my internet. Appreciate it.
I have a question, Bob. So when you wrote the Phoenix fix ECIP 1088, you still included 1280. So why do you bring this up now?
Because as we found, basically what we've learned through those implementations, right? That's the reason why. The assumption that we had was that activation via 2200 would be fine. Then we later discovered the interactions that had with 1884. I mean, all of these really are about increasing the cost of the S load opcode, right? I mean, that's the breaking piece, and that's where the crux of all of this discussion comes from, is unlike everything else, that repricing upwards is a breaking change, right? That's where all of the controversy, discussion, debate is around, right? Is do we make that same breaking change or not? Also, is it breaking for us? But that's the bone of contention, really. And to avoid that breaking change, what do you take out or do differently? So that's really where those lines are a bit wobbly and scary.
One of the things that I think is worth mentioning in consideration of, as I think Bob was talking about, 1089 variant that would remove the gas repricings with an intention of reducing complexity and thereby reducing risk. I think that it's worth keeping in mind too that not in certain cases, particularly with regard to the balance opcode, which 1884 would reprice to be 75% higher. There is an existing quote unquote vulnerability on ETC that is directly related to the relatively low cost of the balance opcode when used with non-existent addresses, and because of that, not modifying that opcode's gas cost may have negative, at least it may miss an opportunity to work towards resolving that known issue.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question is, do we do these things now unconditionally, or do we come back with EVM versioning in hand and resolve all of these things together in the following hard fork? To me is the question. It's not like that we're not going to address any of these. It's just, what are we doing now? And what is the scope of that?
Does anyone else have comments on that?
Yeah, from my perspective, I don't know. I tried figuring out very recently what the state of account versioning was, and I actually can't find anything. So, yeah, sure. If we want to wait, that's fine. But understand we're kind of waiting on account versioning, like at least a base implementation to be implemented. So just that might be worth thinking about.
Yeah, it seems like adding account versioning would be like an additional unknown on top of like all the other things. I would still be just in favor moving ahead with parity, and like waiting on an account versioning feature, like Greg said. I'm not sure is like I'm not sure as to its like I guess terminal viability.
So
I would pitch in my 2 cents there. I agree. I am a fan and a proponent of account versioning and a versionless EVM and unobservable gas in the little bit longer term. But right now I would be a little bit shy just because of the extra complexity in regard to a desirable timeline for this interoperability push.
I just dropped in the core ECIP's channel on the Discord there, just the little definition of 1884. So what you have in 1884 is there's actually 4 changes. So there's repricing of S-load operation, there's repricing of balance operation, repricing of Xed code hash, and there's also the self-balance opcode. So ECIP 1080 was a definition of a standalone self-balance opcode change, so that both, I think, of these 2 options that we've got going forward would deliver that new opcode, so that in terms of your opcode API surface, they'd be the same. The difference really is about these 3 repricings. So the S-load repricing is the one which broke backwards compatibility in a practical way for those the Aragon smart contracts, but also I think for Dharma and some others, some of which had got upgradable smart contracts already, so they were able to kind of like work around that. The Aragon ones hadn't, and those were the ones that got badly broken. But really, it's that S load and the balance that are the kind of the controversially ones, I guess. In that the S load actually did, is a known breaking change, and then the balance one is the one with the DOS vector. I don't know. I haven't seen anything in terms of Xcode hash being a DOS vector, but presumably it is as well. I mean, ultimately anything, can be, and all of these really, I guess you could see them as sort of optimizations, not strictly a security issue per se, more quality of service.
So I hear several voices in favor of ECIP 1088. But I also hear you, Bob, saying we could have a modified version of 1088 with just the self-balance opcode. Or you also proposed earlier today having 1089 without NetGuard gas metering changes. How shall we proceed from here? What's the general sentiment?
And just to be clear, my reservation about 1283 is just whether 1083, in the same way as 2200, has got an assumption around that S load change. You know, is 1283 actually standalone, or is that tied in with 1884 repricings as well? And I don't know the answer, but you know, we need to like have a better idea on that, to my mind, before being able to make a decision on whether or not whether or not 189 is viable, or is 189 yet another flavor of failure.
Yeah, exactly. I think this is the main reason why most of the people on this call so far raised the voice in favor of 1088. Let me just ask, does anyone oppose strictly going with the vanilla Istanbul as defined in 1088?
So, I mean, it's not an over my dead body for me. I just think I think we're close to being able to have a viable, more conservative option in 1089. I think, you know, we've gone through all these failed pieces, and I think that, you know, if we did a 1089 but without the repricings as well, I think, to my mind, that's just as safe an engineering approach as the all-in. But it also, for bad and good, means that we don't have those repricings. So that means that we're not breaking anything, I hope, but it also means that we're still vulnerable. So I think it's really this straight trade-off between, well, do we take these repricings, which are probably going to make us safer, but we do so at the cost of kind of compromising on the philosophy a little.
Which compromise is that on the philosophy side?
That we are making repricings that we know have broken existing deployed smart contracts on Ethereum, at least. We don't know whether doing those same things on ETC is going to break existing deployed contracts, but it might well do.
Maybe this is the place for a philosophical rabbit hole, but I think it's worth pointing out that the ETC and ETH chains have been adding opcodes and modifying gas costs for opcodes since the Homestead fork. So in my opinion, philosophically, if contracts are using hard-coded gas assumptions, then not only are they probably poorly engineered contracts, but in my opinion, it's not the responsibility of the chain or its stewards to actually care about whether or not we break contracts. I mean, I think it would be great to avoid, but there certainly has been a precedent for gas repricings since the good old days. So I don't think there should have been or has been any assumption or guarantee of prioritizing not breaking existing contracts or finding existing contracts that might break or making decisions based on that.
Well, I mean, obviously there was the major repricing after the Shanghai attacks. What further repricings have there been upwards?
There were also repricings with EIP2, which was the Homestead fork that modified the create call price, raising it from 24,000 to 53,000. And if we're only talking about repricings, you're right, in EIP 150, that modified the costs of 3, 4, 5, 6, looks like Xcode size, Xcode copy, balance, S-load call, delegate call, call code, and self-destruct. EIP 160, which for Classic was at block 3 million, modified the X price. And that's all I have in my notes right now.
And I guess the difference here, and this is kind of the discussion that both Wei and I had on the Ethereum All Core devs, is the distinction between emergency repricings because the network is on fire versus preventative, more optimization style. And really with the thought that if you did have working versioning, EVM versioning, which 1702 has been a proposal for and has been implemented for nearly 2 years now. If you did have that you would have these two categories of repricing: non-emergency versioned repricings, where you are repricing at a point in time, but you're grandfathering in the previous ones so that you have no risk whatsoever of breaking anything that's running, versus emergency, unconditional, there is an attack vector which is going to kill the network. So really that you have those two categories, and are these repricings here of that emergency category or not? That's sort of the uncertainty, I guess.
I hear you on that. I think it's an interesting idea. One of the question marks for me that comes up there is when a repricing, so when that distinction happens and where. So for example, with the current balance opcode prices and certain client and the standard client implementations for that, let's say that block processing times increase 500%, so we have a quality of service maybe issue, but then does it become an emergency if block processing times go up to 600% or 700% or 7,000%? So in my opinion, making that distinction is always going to be a challenge of navigating a gray area, because a DDoS attack is it is a vulnerability and it is a problem, but it's a problem because quality of service degrades to a low number, where that low number is pretty arbitrary and is just defined when people stop using it, which can be hard to measure.
So we only have a couple of minutes left. I want to work towards concluding this call, and I want to give the chance to anyone who favors 1089 over 1088. Or in general, the question: does anyone have does strongly oppose 80 over 1088?
Could you repeat that last bit? I think you cut out a.
Oh, sorry, I just want to know if there's anyone here favoring or strongly favoring or strongly opposing 8.
I guess I would just say that I'm in favor of 1088, just vanilla change.
I like 1088.
I'm also good with 1088.
I like vanilla.
Okay, so I would conclude that this call is in favor of 1088. I will ask this question now: does anyone strongly oppose 1088?
So just to note for the log here that Don't Panic Burns has said 1088 as well. 1088 is not an over my dead body for me.
Okay, so I understand, Bob, you are not in favor of 1088. You're going to.
Yeah, my preference would be a 1089 without 1283 as well. I think that would be safe and consistent. But if if really we're in a place where 1088 is much preferred, then I don't object to that. It wouldn't be my preference, but I don't object.
Okay, since nobody really spoke up in favor of 1080, say this is off the table, and I would propose that we withdraw it. And I would propose that ECIP 1088 do last call and implement it on the testnets to have early results. Adding review period. So to get there, we still need to make this decision to, and let me open the request. We need to approve the request 200 first, which basically rejects all three ECIPs for Aslan, 1, Phoenix, 78, gas patch for the classic test, 80. Anyone opposes? Shall we move on with the content? Rough.
I would agree that we have rough consensus. You do keep dropping out, by the way.
I'm sorry, it's probably my headphone. Okay, so unless someone speaks up now in strong opposition, I would declare rough consensus on rejecting the three aforementioned CIPs, 1061, 78, and 86, and at the same time moving 1088 to last call, implementing 1088 on the testnets with a sufficient last call review period, and destroying 89. Is that correct?
Just before we do that, could you just briefly talk about how this will roll out on the testnets?
Sure. So on the testnets, we have the situation that the Aslan hard fork is technically activated. I'm saying technically because in the client there is fork block number. Practically, it's also activated, but much later. I think for both testnets, Scotty and Moda, the moment a transaction with the relevant opcode for Aslan was triggered was around, I don't have the exact number, but it's like 100 or 200,000 blocks after the actual hard fork. So we still have a long chain on both testnets that's valid both on an Agata configuration and on an Aslan configuration. And to roll out this ECI, this change we decided today, we would just patch the clients and we would reset the miners to synchronize with the Agata chain instead of the Aslan chain, and then start mining or validating from there until we hit the Phoenix block. That's a larger. Shouldn't be that hard as long as we coordinate among miners and validators.
And around where is that activation block likely to happen in terms of real times?
So I was checking this with Isaac a couple of days ago. I don't have the block number here, but it should happen within the next 6 weeks. Do you want to comment on that, Isaac?
Thinking about it. Yeah, I think, Bob, just the process will be that Afri and I have figured out where the latest viable block number is that we'll need to reset to. And then we'll just schedule out and propose a number that is within that time frame that Afri mentioned, and just shoot for that.
Because I imagine that we really want to get this vanilla one live on the test nets fairly soon, right? We don't really want that to be weeks and weeks out.
Yeah, as soon as possible is good. Yep, absolutely. And of course, the benefit is that now, as has been discussed in some of the chats too, is that we can, with this reset, which avoids the complexities around disabling opcodes and then re-enabling opcodes and EIPs, we can just roll out these specifications all together in tandem, which will simulate what's going to happen on mainnet too. So that's a testing feature bonus for us.
Yeah, that's certainly very valuable.
Okay, if there's nothing else, we finish this meeting on time. Any last comments?
Just on name, so are we now calling this hard fork just Phoenix?
Yeah, we just call it Phoenix because it will be protocol parity and be our day.
Yeah, that will certainly help on messaging.
So
and just for differentiation's sake, I've been trying to, when I refer to the ECIPs that sounds like we're about to reject, which is Aslan with the Phoenix Fix, I've always been referring to that Phoenix bundle as the Phoenix Fix bundle, which hopefully, although only a little bit, it does differentiate Phoenix Fix from Phoenix.